Thank you very much, Ivan, and good morning, everyone here. I hope you're well. I'm excited to be here at Gamelab for a second year. I'm not sure why they asked me back, but here I am on stage again. Thank you for having me. My name is Robert Purchase. I've been writing for Eurogamer for a very long time. Maybe you've read something I've written, but my job title sounds puny in comparison to the man sitting next to me. From EA-Sports, introducing Daryl Holt, the Vice President and Head of Operations Worldwide. Welcome, Daryl.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Daryl, how long have you been with EA now?
About 14 years now, all working with EA-Sports.
And can you give us a brief snapshot of your career, how you got to this position that you're in today?
Well, it was very serendipitous that I ended up in video games to start with. I think my wife was always saying if I found something that combined my love of technology and creativity and art forms and business, I'd be happy, and certainly video games has been that way. Ended up, my nephew was actually trying to interview or go to school for video games and wanted to figure out if he could come take a tour of EA, and that's how I ended up contacting them. Next thing I know, they had some job openings that seemed really interesting at the time. So that's how I ended up joining EA, and I actually came in art production management to start with before I became the studio COO of Tiburon, and then moved up doing various roles, GM of sports, different franchises, and then eventually becoming the head of operations and COO for sports.
Did you know, as a child growing up, that video games was a thing that you wanted to be into, or was it one thing led to another and you found yourself in the world of video games?
Definitely more the latter, because I don't think back in my days, I'm showing my age, when I was playing video games, I think it was the classic of your parents telling you you need to stop, and that's never going to amount to anything, how wrong my parents were. I think the love of gaming and that exploration and creative storytelling and using your imagination, it was all these things in my childhood, and games was there. So I think it was an influence on me in terms of things I pursued, either in my educational capacity or my jobs. So it was probably forging a path without me knowing it, but ending up in games, I think, as I said, was something unexpected, but delightful nonetheless.
What did you think when you first joined EA Sports? What was EA and EA Sports like then? Because it's in the last decade, really, and we'll come on to this, that it's grown kind of exponentially. What was it like then? What did you think of it? What were your first impressions?
Well, I definitely was a fan. So I've been playing, as I said, games for a long, long time, and sports has always been a part of video games, I think, since its infancy. So playing sports games growing up and playing sports growing up, EA Sports was a brand that was well known.
Which were your favorite games?
I played a lot of Madden and NBA Live back in the day when I was a kid, and so it was definitely that element of if it's in the game, it's in the game. That whole moniker really resonated with me, and myself and my friends playing together and playing those games. We felt like if it was something as close to getting as real as possible on a video game, then EA Sports was probably the people that were going to be doing it.
Now, Daryl, here's something I've always wanted to clear up. Do you have to be sporty to work for EA Sports?
That's a good question. No, you do not. Definitely, if you come in, we've got a lot of people that are passionate sports fans in EA Sports, but also those that just either love video games, love creative problem solving, love technical innovation and problem solving. So you don't have to be a sports fan, but I would challenge you that if you once you leave, you probably are. I think people pick a sport, they pick a team, they pick their allegiance, and very quickly it starts to become kind of the lifeblood of the work schedule that you almost can't help but get caught up in the world of sport.
What was the mission, or perhaps your mission back then? Where could you see areas that EA Sports could improve or grow?
Well, I think there's always that element of how do you make it more authentic? How do you put more and more of the game so that what you see on the real football pitch or basketball court or football field, those are all things that we want to see how we can replicate. And then technology, Moore's law in effect. When you look at technology in video game, that constantly gives us the capabilities and the power to do more. And so the aspect of bringing those things that are real and figuring out how to connect players in so many different unique ways, I think was a lot of what's been on our mind since we started playing games to now as we create them in EA Sports.
Yeah, and here's another very hard-hitting question. Seeing as you're an expert on sports, because you're kind of a professional, because you work for a company with sports in the title, who, Daryl, is going to win the World Cup?
Oh, the World Cup. How many people are watching the World Cup? Lots of people out there, I hope. The World Cup is a great stage. It is all the
I feel
drama.
like you're dancing around the question here.
I'll answer it. It's a lot of drama, a lot of surprises, a lot of things happening. Who thought Mexico would beat Germany? Argentina looked like they might not get out of the group round. Russia playing really great in their home country. So lots of things happening, and I think as Amy Henning will tell you at some point this week, the value of a great story. I think sports and the World Cup is a great story. So predictions. Being from the U.S., I don't have a horse in this race, as we like to say. So I could lean into and say, well, EA Sports and the FIFA engine predicted that France would win, but
is that what happened? Okay.
I'm a relatively intelligent person, so I think the correct answer is Spain.
England?
Spain. But we'll see. Who knows? It's going to be, I think, really, really a great tournament.
You mentioned, actually, you don't have a horse in the race. The US sadly aren't in it. But do you get, when the US aren't in the World Cup, does the sport still travel? Are people still caught up in it? Because I get the feeling that football is a growing sport in the US, and also that FIFA is a growing franchise in the US. Are the two things going hand in hand?
They definitely are going hand in hand. I think you'll see fans of different teams and different football clubs in the U.S. And I have friends that are friends of Manchester United and Barcelona and Real Madrid. They are passionate about those teams that they have adopted, even though they don't live in those countries or aren't from those countries. I don't know what the origins of the connections are, but they seem to make them, and it might be very well in the games that they play.
Yeah.
And that's where we see FIFA growth. I remember traveling to Spain many years ago with my best mate, many years ago, and we got into a taxi cab, and he started talking about wanting to go see a football game, and started mentioning the players, and the cab driver was very taken. He goes, "How do you know all these Spanish players?" And he's like, "PlayStation." And he's like, he goes, PlayStation, FIFA, understand. So it translates, and people, I think, start to adopt and start to adapt to those teams and make it their own.
Yeah, it's funny how synonymous, people don't even have to say, I'm playing FIFA, the computer game, the video game. FIFA is just the noun now for people. Broaden that boundary a little bit, and how much do you see the sport influencing FIFA, obviously, but also FIFA influencing the sport in the other direction? Does that happen? Do you see that?
I think we see it in all of our sports video games. There is a strong connection between the real world of sport and the virtual world. We've seen people try to replicate plays. We've seen athletes in news conferences talk about they tried that first in a video game, whether it be in Madden NFL or FIFA or NBA Live or something. So that aspect of us growing up probably playing the game and trying to relive sports fantasies that happen in real life has kind of juxtaposed now to us playing the sports games and go, I might be able to try that on the court or the pitch when I go out and play the
But if you do
game.
that, you just try it with your thumbs.
Yeah.
How does that work on the field? I don't understand. I suppose pushing that a little bit further, what role do you think your games play in the lives of young people?
Well, I think games in general, when you think about play, and this is a philosophical, I think, approach or vision that I have, is we start playing at a very early age. It's in our DNA. When we're on the playground trying to figure out how to win or lose, learn rule sets, explore, push boundaries, it happens through play. So I think in terms of that being in our DNA and us thinking as video game makers that interactive play is one of the most rewarding ways to kind of solve problems and learn. It's why the gamification of business industry is happening. Games can teach. You can learn through games. So I think when I think of young people playing games, there's an element that certainly they're exploring their own creativity and their own rule sets, virtually speaking, but they're also learning, and they're also thinking about things differently. My daughter started playing at age 3, and I think it's a valuable part of her creativity and imagination and upbringing of how it applies. So we have a responsibility, I think, to deliver great experiences, and I think games have an opportunity to continue to teach.
Is she good at Madden?
She doesn't play a lot of Madden, but she can play just about any video game and pick it up pretty quick.
So we touched on this earlier, but FIFA's rise, and I know I'm talking about FIFA a lot here, I know particularly because, FIFA's massive here, NBA is big too, but FIFA's the one I think for Europeans that really travels, that really spreads here. And it's FIFA's rise over the last decade, I suppose that's quite a rough estimate, but it's been incredible. Mm-hmm. How has EA done that? What's the magic ingredient? No, what's the... how have you taken FIFA and turned it into not only one of the biggest sports games, but one of the biggest video games?
Well, I think there's no one single magic ingredient or silver bullet. I think it's a combination of things, and certainly it starts with the people and the talent on the teams. They're very passionate, very creative. It's a multinational team, so the world's game becomes the world's game, on the video game platforms as well. And I think they bring that multinational, multicultural view. And then they're just striving. Creativity is at the center of everything we do. They're constantly looking for innovative ways to add to the game and broaden the game. So that's kind of the first part of it. And then I think just the global expansion of football itself and how people and fans are embracing it, that adds to it. And because the players are very much a key part and a key ingredient. The feedback we get from them, the experiences that they share with us, that drives our team to constantly improve and add and change things. So that they're engaged and they're happy and they're having fun.
And I imagine along the way, actually before I go there, was there a turning point where FIFA was say a certain level and then something happened and FIFA became entered a whole new ballpark, if you like?
There's probably a few different things. I don't know any that I could put my finger on besides that point when...
I mean, FIFA Ultimate Team has been massive.
That's where I was going to go. It's like FIFA Ultimate Team was certainly a game changer from the standpoint of how people play and engage. And I think what started off as an extra mode that was an actual separate piece that you had to pay for to it's a part of the game, and we wanted to broaden that competitive nature. It's the place where most of the most competitive players want to go play on FIFA. They want to build that ultimate team. They want to engage with it. They want to beat you online in a healthy competition and prove that they're the best. And I think that has helped grow the fan base and grow the gamers to wanting to engage in that way.
And because it's $1 billion a year franchise, is that right? That's incredible. And how big is the operation? Because we don't often see this. A game arrives on the shelves every year. And that's nice, you take it home and play it. But how big is the work? How many people does it take to make that happen?
I don't know that I can tell you exactly how many people. It takes a company to ship FIFA.
Is it more than 1,000?
I don't know, but it's the core team, obviously, building the game in Vancouver. That has expanded. We've got people in Bucharest. We've got people in Asia, people working on mobile, Switch, PC, the consoles, all the people in localization to get the game to launch in all the different languages. There are so many different aspects and so many different things. It's why FIFA is probably our most in-demand franchise when something new happens in the industry. A first party or someone will come to say, we want FIFA. It's that attractive and that big. So I think it's become a big franchise, but it's also become something that the whole company has to embrace, and everyone gets around it to kind of ship that game every year.
Yeah. So I imagine, because of the motion capture and the increasing technological capabilities of games, that over the years you've met many sporting celebrities, as it were. Do any of them stick in your mind when I say that? Were there any memorable encounters with stars?
There's always memorable encounters. I try to keep very base level blood pressure and heart. It's like they're people. And they're people, and I think that being at an event like this, and when you meet different game makers and such, we all love the games, and we all want to understand whether it's the sport or the video game. And so they're very human, and they're very down to earth when they want to provide input. They want to help us make the game. They want to provide feedback. If anything, where there becomes some unique interactions, it's when you might talk about their ratings. Speed ratings is one of those that I think comes up a lot.
Who had a moan? Come on, who moaned about their rating?
They all moan about it, I think. I'm not going to mention any names. I think I heard at one point at a Super Bowl or a Madden Bowl party before the Super Bowl that two players actually raced out on the street to prove who was faster. We've had someone, I remember a basketball player that, again, will remain nameless, was in our studio in Orlando and came in and said, why is my dunk rating so low? My dunk rating needs to be higher. And the producer said, well, maybe there's something we can do about that, and turned to the person who deals with our stats and ratings, and completely deadpan just turned and looked and said, listen, you dunked twice in games in regulation last year. You dunk some more, I'll raise your rating. It was as simple as that, and the player was like, all right, it's fair enough. I'm going to see if I can dunk a little bit more.
That's incredible. Are there any people you remember meeting particularly where you were a bit starstruck? Because I remember Pele coming on stage, Pele, and that's very glitzy. But was there anyone for you? I mean, I guess being an American football fan, Madden, was there anyone you met and you thought, oh my goodness?
Yeah, certainly football fans or football players themselves being a fan of the sport of the NFL when they come into the studio. There are those. I unfortunately did not get a chance to meet Dan Marino last year. Growing up and being born in Florida, he played for the Miami Dolphins. He would have been a childhood hero of mine. Did not get a chance to meet him. I might have had a heart palpitation, from that. But for the most part, I think I'm just in awe of the champions and some of the people that come in, like Steve Young or others that want to truly share their knowledge. Much like John Madden as a football coach in the NFL, wanted to make sure that Madden NFL, when it was created, or John Madden Football back in the day, was an authentic representation of the sport because he wanted it to teach people. And he wanted it to kind of share the actual essence of the game. And he would not have allowed his name to go on it if we couldn't get 11 versus 11 on the football field. And I think that was part of the challenge up front. So there are always, I think, those athletes and those stars and those coaches and people that want to share their knowledge. So yeah, I think there will be someone I'm sure that I'll meet and I will fall over backwards. Tiger Woods was one I met back in the day that I was in awe of just his mind and his memory about how he could remember every shot at every tournament. Wow. And every course. And it was quite amazing where he could just pull them up almost like a mnemonic computer, right? It was pretty awe-inspiring.
Wow. I guess what I'm really driving at here is who's nicer, Messi or Ronaldo? There is a correct answer here, obviously.
I will leave that one to the secrets of EA.
Bringing it back to Spain, where of course football is huge. We're in one of the most famous footballing cities in the world, a little-known team called Barcelona. And you were here recently, as Ivan mentioned, and you were here for a FIFA eSports tournament. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, the road to the global World E-World Cup, as we call it, started and kicked off in January in Barcelona. So that was one of the first tournaments that we had here. I think it was won by a 16-year-old Donovan Hunt, who came out of nowhere to win it, which was a great story when we think about all of our best players and trying to elevate, give them opportunities to be champions. I think he was ranked 55th on the Xbox One leaderboard. So no one really, I think, saw him coming. Which was kind of cool. But that kicked off that series, and we will eventually crown that champion in London, I think August 2nd through the 4th. But we've had 20 million people interact with that tournament thus far in just the second year of doing FIFA-related competitive gaming tournaments. So it's been a big draw, and we see it growing. So it was kind of cool to kick it off here in Barcelona because, as you said, it's an iconic city. The stadium, I think it's the second largest football stadium in the world. Great team, the blue and garnet of Barcelona, and so it's one of those things where I think that stadium is almost like a tourist destination as much as it is a football mecca. So I think it was great to kick it off here. Fantastic.
Actually, mentioning esports brings me on to a slightly delicate subject. So the World Health Organization recently put out a new draft of their database, and among it is a new thing, a gaming disorder that may be put into law, and then governments around the world may have to then put that into their health services and things like that. It would officially recognize it. Esports is tricky because it sits in an area where people play a lot of video games, and then maybe through that they grow a skill that then pushes them into esports. As a company that has an esports area to it, how do you look at it? What's your take on that?
Well, I don't think we look at any of our game mechanics or game elements to kind of fall into what that quote-unquote diagnosis I think is trying to imply. I think using a lot of common sense, talking with all our trade industry partners, we don't really see that aspect. I think there's an element to just being passionate about a certain element in your life, whether that be playing a real sport or training for an e-sport. So I think there's a dangerous slippery slope there, but I don't think I can really comment on what's right, wrong, or indifferent versus what we believe and what we, I think, work with parental organizations, the ESA, all of our trade associations across the industry, and figure out what's the right way to counsel people on playing games, interacting with software, whether it be the ratings or the amount of time they spend or anything else. Yeah.
So you were also here in Spain at the end of 2017, and this is what Ivan was alluding to, a little tease there. So tell us, why were you here, and what is this mysterious thing?
Well, I did come here to Spain, actually in Madrid, and brought some different teammates here. We met at the EA Madrid studio location. and had a chance to also meet with some university professionals, some different studios, some business professionals. A lot of it was all in a fact-finding kind of mission to understand Spain and whether or not that was an appropriate location for us to expand our worldwide development studios for EA Sports. So we have studios in Vancouver and Orlando, Bucharest, Austin, and Köln. So it's not something that we take lightly. So I think it was to come here and really gain an understanding of Spain and the culture and the business environment and things. And while I didn't have anything to share then, I'm excited to announce today that we are expanding EA Sports to Madrid. And if any astute reporters, I think we're picking up on some job recs that we posted last week without any announcement. I knew he was going to be here today, but it's something that we looked at, and actually Veronica Perez is here from our EA Sports and EA Talent Acquisition team. So if you're interested in any of those positions, she's the person to talk to. She might be pretty popular today, but it's something that's very exciting for us because, like I said, we don't take it lightly. We look at the right situations, and I think having 24 positions posted right now to start work on our NBA Live title in conjunction with our team in Orlando, I think it's pretty exciting and something we're looking forward to.
That sounds great. So, as you mentioned, it's not something you take lightly, and you mentioned some of these big cities around the world, but also these big gaming cities as well, where these big studios are. Why Spain? Why Madrid? What was it that convinced you it was the right place?
A lot of different things, and I think the visit really helped cement.
Was it the food?
The food just not bad. There's definitely not a problem with the food. But I think that there is an element when you look at it just at a surface level. Certainly, it's an attractive destination to live and work in. It's got a great infrastructure with airports and trains. It's got a nice business climate. All those things that you look for, like that's great. It's table stakes,
and a nice climate.
But it starts with the talent, and I think we looked at the talent and tried to get a gauge on what type of pipeline. We met with university officials and understand there's a nice set of programs to develop young talent. There's experienced game developers here. There seemed to be just a lack of jobs necessarily in the industry to maybe keep them here or to continue to grow. But it seemed like the talent was here in a multicultural, multinational approach to certain things. We certainly had an infrastructure here with a studio in Madrid, deals with our localization and compliance. So at least that was taken care of, which helped make it easy to start. But it does start with the teams and the talent itself, and we felt like that was the right culture and a great sports culture as well. So for EA Sports, that's never a bad thing to have that mixed in with the ingredients.
And what do you hope EA Sports opening a studio here? What do you hope you can do for the industry here? What do you see as the future of that studio and the industry in Madrid, and then perhaps over Spain as well?
I think at a really origin or base level, developers in video games, you think about video game companies and you just think about their quote-unquote video game companies, but I tend to think there's other elements. When we look at games, there's aspects of artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, networking. There's so many different things that go into making games today that's almost ground zero for expanding those types of technologies out. So I think it brings a lot of innovation, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit to the area when we start thinking about developers that work in games and where they might branch out. I think it also allows us to think about the university programs. I'd love to work with some of the university systems to figure out how we continue to build curriculum and programs that will train people to work in these different fields as what we have today, as what will emerge in the future. And I think it grows the vibrancy of the industry. We've got more development here, more types of games that might be done here. Hopefully that creates something even bigger, because coming here to this event and seeing just the aspect that started probably maybe with Pyro Studios back in the 90s, there is a heritage of game development and game talent here that I think could grow.
Fantastic. So we're going to open up for some questions in a moment, so have a think, and we'll get a microphone to you. Put your hand up, do a little dance. But before we get there, EA Sports games are so pervasive the world over that not only in at home in the US or here in Spain, but all corners of the world. When you're walking around, you must see people playing or talking about the franchises that you have. Have there been any moments, or when you think about that, how does it make you feel that you're spreading something like that, across the world, and to almost, not everyone, of course, but Yeah,
that's a great question. It is, it's inspiring. I think that, we have a vision to grow the love of sports, EA Sports, and figure out how people can create, connect, and self-express. And so when you run into someone, whether they see the logo or they talk about a particular game or they find out that you worked with that team or on that game or in that company, their face just lights up. And I think those types of positive interactions are the things that I love about gaming. Every industry and creative pursuit probably has some of the negative things around it, but I think generally video games is positive and people love to play and love to talk about games and love to interact. I think that's why events like this exist. So when you meet that and that type of person, you get a chance to talk to them and you realize that the love of play is really what drives them. It keeps me in games. It keeps me wanting to create games. And I think even on the visit that we had in Spain, one of my favorite parts of it was going to a studio called Tequila Works, and Raul there who runs it, meeting him and talking about his team. And I went home and played Rime and loved the game. It breaks down barriers and it just becomes an ability to share and talk about creativity and story and things that you did either as a young person or that you're doing today. And that is something that I will look back on one day, hopefully many, many years in the future when I retire, and go, wow, that was a special industry to work in, and it was special people to interact with.
I think that's a lovely place to wrap it up. Let's say thank you to Daryl first. Thank you very much. And then we will open to your lovely questions. So I feel like I'm getting some feedback. So please pop your hands up and we will run or swiftly walk a microphone to you. There's one down here. We can just about see you. I'm getting some glare. But,
so you said that EA has opened, has entered in Madrid. Did you choose Madrid because it was a central point for all of Spain, or because Madrid has something special other cities don't have?
Well, I think for us in Madrid, the first thing was the existing EA location was in Madrid. So there's a studio there that has some great teams that work on our sports games and localization and compliance. So that, again, gives us an infrastructure to start with. I think it's helpful that it is centrally located in Spain, and probably why that was where we started. So it was easy for us to go, okay, in Spain, and taking Spain as a target, then Madrid seemed to be the most logical space for us to start. And putting that aside, it is a great city. I think it's a wonderful place. Meeting some of the people there in the universities and walking around the city, it's a great and wonderful city in Spain, as is Barcelona and many other places in Spain. But we're really excited about Madrid. I think it's going to be a fun place to start.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Come on, ask a question. Here, yeah.
Hello, thank you for the interview. Talking about NBA Live, do you have any plan or any strategy to retake the #1 spot in basketball game as you did in the past with FIFA against Pro Evolution Soccer?
Yes, I think we do. NBA Live has certainly been carving out its own identity here over the past couple of years, and I think last year it broke through with its own voice in a certain way that we're trying to build upon. So I think when we look at NBA Live 19, how it's building on the one and its aspect of going a little bit global and my squad and things around that, there are things that we see happening on the quality of the gameplay and the quality of the overall experience that I think is resonating with fans, that now we just need to continue to invest and add more to. That's one of the reasons why, as we start eSports Madrid, they'll be working on NBA Live, because I think bringing in that multicultural, international aspect to it as well, in terms of those people, where basketball is clearly the second most popular sport in Spain, and I think Spain has the second-ranked men's and women's team in the world in Spain. So I think it's a type of sport that resonates well in this culture, and we hope that those people can add to the plans and the strategy that we have in place to continue to grow NBA Live. We think there is an appetite for both games, because there's some unique things about it, while at the same time NBA is a growing sport internationally, and so we see NBA Live growing, and we see the people working here on it helping that growth.
Lovely, thank you. We have a question down here.
I kind of wanted to get at the difference between the esports events and real life sporting events, and I guess we all know what a really exciting real life sporting event looks like. So what have you figured out about how to try to make an esports real life event just as exciting, or somehow compelling in a very different way, I guess?
That's an interesting question. I think that for me personally, it probably starts with this mindset that I have certainly growing up playing sports video games and have seen it with my children and friends, that when you execute something in a video game, maybe a last-second touchdown in Madden or a penalty shot goal or a last-second basket, you get excited. You have that reaction. And there are esports opportunities where those games, as they are happening, people start to feel the moment when one team or one side or one player is starting to take over or has an opportunity. So I think growing the love of sports also permeates the esports aspect. I can't define what a sport is or isn't. There's so many different things you could say. Give me a rock and kick it down the street and put a score on it, and it's probably a sport. But I think the actual aspects of real professional sports and what gets caught up in that is something we can replicate, because we do look to put authentic experiences in the game and make them as authentic as possible, and try to make sure that the competition for all element exists, so that even you as a new player, what's your path to becoming a champion in an esports league? That might be at a certain level. But the best of the best will want to play, and I think that aspect that comes from sports. When you want to put the best against each other, and you want to see that happen, and you hope that when you're watching a World Cup event, that the final hopefully will have two of the best teams in the world, and we will both be able to appreciate that, even though we might not be fans of those teams. I think that translates to competitive gaming and esports and the audience, and why people are watching things on Twitch, and why people are watching and just being observers of the sports that are happening. So I think us just making a great game and allowing it to be non-deterministic and allow people to play in their own way, video games is perfect for that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the audiences are slightly different. Even though, for instance, it's a football game or it's a basketball game, the people who are watching, say, FIFA, are watching it as a video game because of the way they play it, and they're watching it in a different way to the way they watch sports. So in a sense, if you were to put, I don't know, two people in the middle of the Nou Camp playing against each other, that would be disingenuous in a way, because it's a different experience and should be kind of nurtured as its own experience. Do you ever feel that kind of duality, and whether you tip one way or the other?
Yeah, I think there's that element of what is sacred and real in the sport, and what kind of translates well or doesn't into the virtual world. But I don't think we get too caught up in it, because as long as we give the tools to our players, and that's not just in how they play, but I think as you see in video games now, whether it be user-generated content and user-generated content tools, as we have a vision to hook up a network of 1 billion players in a network that will allow them to compete and self-express and connect, there probably will be and allow them to create as well. And so there's creation in the games as they're playing it, which I think is very different than the creation that happens on the real world of sport, but it allows them to express themselves. And I think it's that self-expression, whether it be something in the way they play, or the way they look, or the way they act and interact. I think all of those things, elements play together to create something that's unique on its own.
Yeah. You need to sponsor a football team as well. Do we have any more questions? Yes.
Yes, thank you. What do you think is the next biggest trend in business-wise in sports? And what do you think of recent successes, like on mobile, for instance, like Golf Clash, for instance?
I think there is, let me take the second one, I guess, first. There's so many different ways to play, and I think gaming is becoming more and more ubiquitous and hopefully cross-platform, that there can be a mobile experience that's very much a authentic representation of the sport, and a mobile experience that can be just pick up and play and fun, and those things I think will continue to kind of amalgamate together. So there's no shortage of sports and games and things and experiences that we can do. So when we talk about like authentic experiences in EA Sports, it's from the playground to the pros. There's so many different ways to talk about authenticity. But I think as it becomes more personal and more social, there will be different ways to play and different aspects of gaming. Certainly as we think about getting to maybe a streaming service with a player network, there's a lot of different sports experiences that we could offer, that some big, some small, and all kinds of different packages. As far as the way the business is trending, we see sports in general, consumption is changing, interaction is changing, the leagues are getting involved with sponsoring their own teams in esports. I think there's a recognition and evaluation put on the players and how they are sports fans and how they're consuming sports very, very differently than we were even 5 years ago. Consumption in music has changed, consumption in movies has changed, consumption in television is changing, and certainly consumption in sports and video games are changing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. Here. Tim. You're right. You're right.
There you go.
More.
Just here, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
All the way over here. Hey, I'm from the Netherlands, and we've got a government institute who's now taking measures to online gambling, loot boxes, stuff like that. And FIFA, with its Ultimate Team, kind of has that element too. So my question is, will you take actions on that for FIFA 19, or is that not something you're worried about?
Well, I can't comment on what the countries may think is gambling or not. We certainly don't think any of our game mechanics or any of the Ultimate Team aspects are gambling. I think there's no real-world currency valuation on any of those items. You can gain those items through play. You know what you're getting when you buy a pack of assets. So I think it's an aspect that we don't agree with any of those elements being quote-unquote gambling. While at the same time, I think we're looking at things just within our player base and understanding how we provide choice, how we provide fairness, value, and fun in our player-first engagement model, such that when you choose to engage in a game or buy something or not, that it's very fair and that it's not pay to win or anything of those natures. So the loot boxes, as you probably saw from EA Play, there will be no loot boxes in Battlefield 5 and none in Anthem, for example. So I think there's a shift in the industry, and it's one of the things to always be listening to our players to understand the choices they want to make and the things that are important to them, because that's really what's important to us, is understanding how we respond to the players, how we make the best fun experiences in the way that they want to play, and that's really what we're focused on.
We have two down here. Could we get a microphone down here, please?
Hello, here in the middle. Hello. Yeah, you mentioned to make the games like more authentic and realistic and go in this direction as technology advances. Have you thought about making there for new platforms like VR, or to be really like immersive, like a next step?
VR is an interesting platform. I think we look at it and try to figure out what's the right experience for the platform. We certainly are continuing to develop and experiment and work with those platforms. Frostbite, our proprietary game engine, allows us to do VR renders. So it's all there for us to do, but we don't want to artificially push something that feels wrong for the experience. We've had Madden NFL runs on, we've got aspects of it that we can look at in virtual reality, and it just has to be the right experience so that it's fun, that it's accessible. It doesn't mean that we haven't tried things and we'll continue to try things and figure out what might be the best experience. But it's also, we look at those technologies and think about how they can help us make games as well. So having a game work in Frostbite where an art director can walk in and be in the middle of a stadium and look at it in virtual reality, or walk up to a player model and walk around it in virtual reality, and those types of things, and augmented reality can help us make games as well as play them. So I think we look at the full compendium of the technology and the pioneering aspect of it and think about ways that we can use it, while we're also trying to figure out how we deliver great play experiences to our consumers. And I think a little more time and innovation on that platform as it becomes a little more accessible will make that easier for us to develop on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we really do have people down here.
How is the transition to games more like a service affecting the development on games such as FIFA, Madden, etc.?
I think games as a service, just the whole aspect of live services, that was one of those game-changing moments for us, to your earlier question, Robert, that when consoles were online and we could actually push content to our players in real time, so that if a player in the NBA broke their nose last night in a game and now they're going to be wearing a face mask, we could push that in the game and be there for our players the next night, so that we can kind of mimic and mirror that. That was kind of the start of our ideas around live services. And I think wrapping services around our game keeps them fresh, keeps it engaging, keeps us adding new content, keeps us tied to the real world of sports, so that we can reflect those stories and those interactions in ways that our gamers can interact with. And I think just that aspect of having live services wrapped around it gives us a broad platform for the future when you think about game development and you think about things that are happening as they're happening. Is there ways for us to interact? Could there be almost an interactive broadcast element of playing games while you're watching a sporting event? I don't think that's too far from making that a reality if we wanted to. It's just what our players want to do and how we interact with those things. Live services and the live aspect of the consoles is key.
Thank you very much. We had a question just in front.
Okay, the team decided not to use Frostbite on the Nintendo Switch version, although the engine was adapted to PS3 and Xbox 360. Instead, you are using a custom engine. Why did you reach that decision?
Well, I think if I understand the question, with the FIFA Switch product being slightly different, not having Frostbite elements in it, I think it's a matter of what we thought was going to be the right gameplay experience to get to our customers on that platform. Gameplay is king in many aspects, especially around FIFA. So the Switch, I think, is a really good representation of the FIFA product and the things that it brings to the table and unique aspects that we deliver on the Switch for that platform that we'll continue to do. But it's an element of the platform, what's the right time to move, because taking something like a game engine and moving it to a particular platform isn't necessarily an easy task. And usually there's trade-offs on how much of the game, what's the important thing of the game you're going to deliver to make sure that we can deliver as much as possible, versus putting, even if we were to take Frostbite to any of our other sports titles, as we took FIFA there first and then Madden NFL following it, it's a major endeavor for the team to actually take a game engine and make that change. So a lot of it is really built around making the right experience for the player.
Lovely. Oh, one right next to you. That's handy.
Madden franchise is growing here in Spain. Do you have any plans to include our language in future games in this area?
That's a great question. I don't know that the team has any specific plans for that, but it's definitely, as we see growth happening, we made a Madden in Espanol version, I think, in 2009, and maybe it was the wrong time to do it because it didn't resonate or do as well as we thought it would, but it's not to say we couldn't return to that. And knowing our localization team is in Madrid, having EA-Sports developers there, that's never a bad thing now as a combination. They're a great team. We love working with the localization team. So no plans yet that I know that we can announce, but certainly something we will keep in mind.
Lovely. And we'll do one final question just over here. Oh, and we'll go there quickly then. Then you, and then you, and then.
Okay. Sorry, so I'm not the last one. Okay. Talking about game as a service, why don't you turn your business is game as a service from a business point of view? I mean, why there is a new FIFA every year instead of a package of update with all the news on with every content, with all the content? Sorry.
Yeah. I think if I understand the question about games as a service and being more of a subscription or a service that's just live, I think we're probably heading in that direction as an industry. I think when we look at how games have changed and the consumption patterns, certainly streaming and subscription are two of the key elements that will change our industry, probably more than it's changed in the last 40 years here that's coming up soon. So it's one of the reasons why we invest in it as a company in EA. We're building towards a player network. We're looking at different subscription aspects like Origin Premier that we announced at EA Play. So I think those things are continuing to work. It's just how do we get them all where we want them to be to make that successful and make that the right model. I think it's an element that excites us as game makers, certainly, because if there's just a service, then we're developing all year long. It's already changed as we used to develop games and then put it in a box, ship it, get it on a shelf, and then maybe take a vacation and come back and start over. Now, once you hit the date on Go Live, that's a whole new world of live services and continuous development that it's really changed how we develop games, and I think that aspect will continue to change. So I think it's coming, it's happening, it's evolving. It just has to be, you can't just artificially go flip a switch and make it happen without us stumbling out of the block, and we want to make sure, again, great experiences, great play for our players.
Thank you, good question. And no, okay, we don't have any more questions. Well, please join me in thanking Daryl Holt, and thank you guys very much for coming and for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Oh.